There's something about a woman who knows who she is in God. You can't shake her. You can't distract her. You can't manipulate her because she's not anchored in emotions. She's anchored in truth. She's not guided by opinions. She's governed by purpose. And when the darkness comes, she doesn't panic. She positions herself because she understands she's not just a woman. She's a territory heaven protects. Ladies and gentlemen, when God marks a woman, the enemy can see it. When heaven invests oil on her head, hell assigns distraction. And that is why you must understand protection doesn't always look like angels with swords. Sometimes protection looks like disconnection. Sometimes God doesn't just hide you from the storm, He hides the storm from you. A woman who is divinely protected from darkness is not emotionally tied to everything and everyone. She understands the difference between covenant and convenience. She knows that not every connection is divine. So when a relationship dies, when a friendship fades, when a door closes, she doesn't mourn what left. She discerns what was lifted. There is divine intelligence in detachment. Detachment is not rejection. Detachment is redirection. When you are emotionally free from what drains your purpose, you become spiritually available for what feeds it. That's why the enemy fights your focus, because your focus fuels your future. And a woman with focus is dangerous to darkness. When a woman walks away without chaos, without cursing, without needing to prove her point, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. She's not running away. She's rising above. The enemy loses grip on a woman who no longer reacts emotionally to every lie, every ghost from the past, or every compliment with an agenda. She knows the value of her spirit, so she does not give her peace away as if it were cheap. Darkness cannot hold what heaven has already released. And the most powerful sign that a woman is divinely protected is not her prayers alone, but her peace, her stillness, her refusal to be pulled into drama. That is not indifference. That is discernment. That is discipline. That is divine covering. Let me tell you something. When you are chosen, you don't need closure. When God removes something, He's not taking, He's making room. A woman covered by heaven doesn't cry over what left. She prepares for what's next because she knows purpose doesn't negotiate with pain. Destiny doesn't compromise for distraction. You can always tell when a woman is divinely protected. She doesn't compete. She doesn't chase. She doesn't clap back. She doesn't prove. She just walks gracefully, wisely, prayerfully, because her path is already prepared. The darkness sees her coming and trembles, not because she is loud, but because she is light. There's a confidence in a woman who is divinely kept. She is not arrogant, but she is aware. She is aware of her anointing. She is aware of her assignment. And she is aware that where she's going, not everyone can come. So she lets people misunderstand her. She lets the crowd walk away because her spirit whispers, you weren't sent for the crowd. You were sent for the crown. And when you are sent for the crown, you don't dance with clowns. You don't entertain the familiar. You don't entertain the foolish. You protect your oil, you preserve your energy, and you prioritize your purpose. Because divine protection requires divine posture. Heaven protects what has heaven's priority. And when a woman aligns with God's timing, even her tears become tools. Even her silence becomes strategy. Even her no becomes sacred. Even her solitude becomes sacred space. Because she's not alone, she's aligned. That's how you know she's divinely protected. She's not moved by storms, she commands them. She's not afraid of rejection, she's refined by it. She's not addicted to attention, she's addicted to obedience. And her obedience builds walls around her spirit that darkness cannot penetrate. She's dangerous because she's disciplined. She's radiant because she's rooted. And she's unshakable because she no longer makes decisions from a place of emotional void, but from a reservoir of spiritual vision. She doesn't carry baggage. She carries destiny. She doesn't carry offense. She carries oil. She doesn't look back because the only direction her purpose knows is forward. She walks away from what no longer serves her purpose without bitterness, because she understands that not every attachment is meant to be permanent. She has grown to recognize that holding on to expired seasons can suffocate her potential. Her identity is not built on people's presence or absence. It is built on divine instruction. When she senses that something has shifted, when she sees the fruit has withered on a tree she once called home, she does not force it to bloom again. She releases it not out of anger, but out of awareness. This is not because she is cold. It is because she is called. Bitterness is a luxury she cannot afford. It clouds vision and corrupts wisdom. She refuses to be a hostage to what wounded her. She refuses to make her heart a storage room for offenses. She understands the cost of carrying what God has already released. So instead of clinging to memories, she holds onto the mission. Her walk away is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. She doesn't slam doors. She simply locks them with love and throws the key into the sea of forgetfulness. This level of maturity doesn't happen overnight. It comes from healing, from being broken and rebuilt by truth. It comes from understanding that rejection is often protection in disguise. It comes from knowing that every no was a setup for a divine yes. When she walks away, she doesn't curse the past. She blesses it for the lessons it brought. But she knows that purpose is too sacred to be delayed by sentiment. She understands that forward is not just a direction, it is an act of obedience. And so she walks with dignity in her eyes and peace in her stride, because what no longer serves her purpose no longer deserves her presence. She is not emotionally entangled in temporary people or distractions, because her spirit has been trained to discern depth over duration. She does not confuse proximity with purpose. Just because someone walks beside her for a season doesn't mean they're assigned to her destiny. She has learned that not every voice deserves a seat in the sanctuary of her heart. Emotional entanglement is the trap that delays divine timing. It makes you pour oil into vessels that were never meant to carry it. But she has been delivered from that. She no longer invests her soul in passing moments or people who lack the capacity to value her calling. Temporary people come to test stability. They come to distract, to entertain, to confuse. But she is no longer driven by the need to be needed. She does not wrap her identity around someone else's inconsistency. She has found her wholeness in God, and that wholeness gives her power to remain detached from emotional chaos. She can love people and still let them go. She can show kindness without surrendering her boundaries. That's not coldness, it's clarity. That's not pride, it's purpose. Distractions come in many forms: flattering words, false promises, even spiritual sounding opportunities. But she doesn't take the bait. Her peace is too expensive. Her time is too sacred. Her destiny is too divine. She's not easily moved by charm or impressed by noise. She has learned that the enemy doesn't always come to destroy. Sometimes he comes to delay. And the easiest way to delay a woman of purpose is to tangle her emotions in what is temporary. But she has grown past that trap. She remains still, steady, focused, because her heart is tethered to vision, not validation. Her emotions no longer control her decisions. Purpose does. And that is why darkness cannot find her footing. Her peace is not disturbed by the chaos around her, because her peace is not circumstantial. It is covenantal. It does not come from things going right, but from being rightly aligned. She has learned to anchor herself in the eternal, not the external. The noise, the drama, the shifting winds of opinion and expectation no longer rattle her soul. She lives from the inside out, not the outside in. Her peace is not the absence of storms. It is the presence of God in the midst of them. She carries that presence, and it guards her like a fortress. Chaos may surround her, but it cannot enter her. People may misunderstand her silence, but she understands the power of stillness. She has learned that the greatest battles are often won without a sound. She doesn't panic when things fall apart, because she knows that sometimes God allows things to collapse so purpose can be rebuilt on truth. She doesn't chase after control, because she knows who holds the outcome. And that knowledge is what gives her rest, even when the world is restless. Her peace is her weapon. It confuses the enemy who expects her to break under pressure. But instead, she worships. She waits. She watches. She listens. She speaks only when led, moves only when released. The chaos outside of her no longer controls the calm within her. That calm is sacred. That calm is evidence that she's protected. She understands that peace is not passive. It's powerful. It's the voice of heaven that says, be still, even when everything screams otherwise. Because she has built her foundation on unshakable truth, her life is no longer reactive but responsive. She moves with wisdom, not worry. She doesn't need to control everything. She only needs to stay connected. And in that connection, she finds a peace the world cannot give and darkness cannot steal. She refuses to settle for less than her calling, even when it's lonely, because she understands that destiny is not a group assignment. She has discovered that purpose often requires isolation before elevation. The voices may be fewer, the rooms may grow quieter, but she's not afraid of the silence. In fact, she has come to honor it, because in that stillness, she hears clearly. In the absence of the crowd, she recognizes the presence of God more intimately. She would rather walk alone in alignment than be surrounded and off course. Settling is not an option for her, not because she is arrogant, but because she is aware. She is aware of the cost her calling carries, the weight of her assignment, and the legacy that her obedience will leave. She cannot afford to downplay what heaven has invested in her just to be accepted by those who do not understand her value. The narrow path may be lonely, but it is also anointed. And she has chosen anointing over attention, calling over comfort, and purpose over popularity. She doesn't compromise vision to feel momentarily validated. She doesn't lower her standards to be loved by those who lack sight. She waits, she builds, she prepares. She knows that everything divine takes time. And though the world may mock her patience, heaven honors it. Her refusal to settle is not stubbornness, it's stewardship. She is stewarding a dream, a destiny, a divine design that cannot be rushed or reduced. She has been through enough to know that loneliness is not always a sign of lack. It's often a sign of protection. God clears the room when he's about to elevate you. And she trusts him enough to remain in the quiet, to stand in the gap between where she is and where she's going, knowing that what she carries is worth the wait. She does not need validation to know she is chosen because her identity is rooted in revelation, not recognition. She has come to a place where the applause of men no longer defines her worth. Her affirmation comes from the one who formed her in secret, not from the ones who see her in public. She walks with quiet confidence, not because she's been celebrated, but because she has been confirmed by God in the private chambers of her surrender. She knows who she is not because people told her, but because purpose revealed it to her. When you've been chosen by God, you don't chase the spotlight, you carry the light. And that light doesn't flicker when no one sees it. It remains steady because it is fueled by divine assignment. She has been delivered from the addiction to approval. She no longer performs for love. She no longer bends to fit rooms she's outgrown, and she no longer silences herself to make others comfortable. She understands that being chosen doesn't always come with applause. It often comes with isolation, with misunderstanding, with rejection. But she does not let the absence of validation shake her conviction. She stands even when it's unpopular. She speaks truth even when it's inconvenient. She walks in purpose even when it's lonely, because she knows validation is fleeting, but calling is eternal. She is not waiting for a crowd to agree. She is walking in what heaven has already decreed. And that assurance becomes her strength. The danger in seeking validation is that it can become a prison. But she has broken free. Her yes to God was her release from the opinions of man. She no longer asks, do they see me? Instead, she asks, am I faithful? Because in the kingdom, faithfulness is favor. And that favor surrounds her like a shield. She discerns motives without reacting to manipulation because her spirit has been trained to see beyond words. She doesn't just listen with her ears. She listens with discernment. She can sense the difference between flattery and honor, between presence and purpose, between appearance and authenticity. She's not impressed by titles or distracted by charm. She has learned to look past the surface and discern the spirit. And in that discernment, she gains wisdom, not to expose others, but to protect her own peace and preserve her divine assignment. Manipulation used to affect her. It used to trigger her emotions, confuse her intentions, and even make her question her worth. But not anymore. Now she sees it for what it is, a distraction, a strategy from the enemy to pull her out of position. And she refuses to give it power. She doesn't react. She doesn't explain herself to every voice that questions her. She doesn't justify her boundaries or entertain guilt-driven tactics. Instead, she quietly removes herself, not in bitterness, but in boldness, not in fear, but in freedom. Discernment is not suspicion, it is spiritual intelligence. It allows her to stay ahead of deception without becoming hardened by it. It allows her to walk in compassion while still keeping her heart guarded. She can forgive without granting access, love without tolerating toxicity, and serve without being enslaved. That is not weakness. That is spiritual maturity. Her silence in the face of manipulation is not passivity. It is strategy. She doesn't fight battles that were never hers. She doesn't argue with confusion. She protects her energy, knowing that every moment spent explaining herself to the wrong people is a moment stolen from her purpose. Her clarity is her defense. Her discernment is her shield. And her stillness is her resistance. She has mastered the art of silence when noise surrounds her, because she understands the power of restraint. She knows that silence is not weakness. It is wisdom wrapped in discipline. She doesn't speak just to be heard. She speaks when heaven gives her words. And when heaven is silent, she waits. She has learned that every battle doesn't deserve a response, and every attack doesn't require a reaction. Her silence is not surrender. It is strategy. It is how she keeps her spirit unpolluted and her mind uncluttered in the midst of confusion. In a world addicted to noise, she has chosen stillness. In an environment filled with opinions, she has chosen discretion. She is not quick to explain, defend, or prove. She doesn't answer every accusation or entertain every distraction. She understands that her value is not in how loud she speaks, but in how well she listens to God, to her spirit, to her assignment. That's why her silence carries weight. It's not empty. It's full of discernment. Noise seeks to pull her out of alignment. It tries to provoke her into reactions that cost her peace. But she guards that peace with silence. She knows that noise often comes before elevation, and not everyone who speaks into her life is sent from God. So she listens carefully, not just to words, but to the spirit behind them. Her silence is a sanctuary. It is where she recalibrates, where she receives clarity, where she is reminded that divine timing is louder than human pressure. She doesn't rush to respond because she's already aligned with a voice that guides her steps. She speaks with intention, not impulse. She remains quiet, not because she lacks power, but because she is governed by purpose. And in that quiet, she wins battles that noise could never conquer. She walks in rooms that once rejected her without the need for revenge, because her confidence is not built on validation. It is anchored in assignment. She no longer seeks to prove her worth to those who couldn't recognize it. Her return is not driven by pride, but by purpose. She understands that when God sends you back to a place that once shut its door on you, it's not for you to announce your success. It's for you to demonstrate your growth. She doesn't carry resentment. She carries revelation. Rejection no longer wounds her. It refines her. It taught her how to stand alone, how to build without applause, how to trust God when support vanished. And because of that, she no longer enters rooms needing acceptance. She brings verity. She brings clarity. She brings grace. Her presence is no longer shaped by the opinions of others. It is defined by the authority she carries. She doesn't walk back with bitterness in her heart. She walks back with wisdom in her steps. Vengeance is not her mission. Elevation is. Her promotion didn't come from people. It came from purpose. And that purpose has purified her heart. She doesn't seek to embarrass those who overlooked her. She seeks to uplift those who are watching her now. She understands that when God lifts you, it's not to mock your past. It's to fulfill his promise. Her return is not a performance. It's a fulfillment. She walks in with quiet strength, not needing to say, "Look at me," now, because her fruit speaks louder than her voice. She's not interested in proving herself. She's interested in completing what she was assigned to do. That's how you know she's protected by God, even in places of former pain. She moves in peace, power, and purpose. She no longer internalizes betrayal because she has learned to separate people's actions from her identity. What they did is a reflection of their character, not her worth. She no longer allows the wounds of others to rewrite the truth about who she is. Betrayal once broke her, but now it builds her discernment. It used to silence her, but now it sharpens her voice. She sees betrayal not as the end, but as divine redirection. Where people saw loss, God was making room. Where others meant to harm her, heaven used it to elevate her. She understands that trusting doesn't mean being blind. It means being obedient. And when betrayal comes, she doesn't crumble. She processes, she prays, and she releases. She no longer carries bitterness in her bones. She refuses to let the actions of the disloyal live rent free in her spirit. She lets go, not because it didn't hurt, but because her destiny is too sacred to be held hostage by pain. Forgiveness is not a weakness for her, it is a weapon. It keeps her free, focused, and flowing in grace. She doesn't seek revenge. She doesn't try to expose the disloyal. She lets God handle what her heart cannot fix. That's maturity. That's spiritual intelligence. She doesn't stay stuck in stories of betrayal. She writes new chapters with boldness. She trusts that the same God who saw the betrayal also saw her future, and he allowed the loss to position her for more. Every betrayal taught her something: how to discern, how to protect her space, how to guard her peace. And now, instead of closing her heart, she covers it. Instead of becoming hard, she becomes wise. She walks forward with strength, not in spite of the betrayal, but because of how God transformed it into a blessing. She does not fear losing people because she has already surrendered to divine separation. She understands that not everyone is assigned to her destiny, and not every connection is meant to be permanent. The fear of loss no longer grips her because she trusts the one who orders her steps more than she clings to human attachments. She's not driven by the need to keep everyone close. She's led by the wisdom to release those who no longer align with where God is taking her. This kind of peace only comes when a woman has died to the need for constant company and awakened to the truth of a divine purpose. She doesn't grieve what God removes. She blesses it and moves forward. She no longer negotiates her growth to maintain relationships rooted in old versions of herself. She is not afraid of being misunderstood, not afraid of walking alone, not afraid of letting go, because she knows that every separation carries instruction. It's not always about who left. It's about what their exit made room for. She doesn't chase closure. She finds clarity. She doesn't beg for explanations. She receives elevation. Her trust is not in people staying. It's in God sustaining. This is how you know she's divinely protected. She lets people go in peace without malice or manipulation because she knows that what is truly hers cannot be lost. She has been through enough to know that divine separation is not rejection. It is refinement. God separates to sanctify, and sanctification is never comfortable, but it is always necessary. She embraces the pruning season because she sees what others can't, the fruit that is coming. So she no longer panics when people walk away. She understands that divine purpose sometimes demands divine distance, and that's a price she's willing to pay. A woman who is divinely protected from darkness is not defined by what she avoids, but by what she overcomes. She does not merely survive, she rises. She does not simply endure, she evolves. Her strength is not loud, but it is unshakable. It is forged in the fire of rejection, refined in the silence of isolation, and crowned in the obedience of surrender. She is dangerous to darkness because she has made peace with separation, silence, stillness, and surrender. She walks with heaven's backing even when earth gives her none. This woman is not common. She is not casual. She is not careless. She has been hidden for a reason, because what she carries is sacred. Her life is not led by popularity, but by purpose. She is not chasing platforms. She's fulfilling prophecy. And when she enters a room, darkness must adjust, because she carries the presence of one who sent her. She does not fear the valley, because she knows who walks with her. She does not bow to pressure, because she's already surrendered to a higher authority. So if you see her standing alone, don't mistake her solitude for weakness. She's not alone. She's aligned. If you see her quiet, don't assume she is unsure. She is discerning. And if you see her walk away, understand, it's not out of offense, but out of obedience. She is divinely protected, divinely preserved, and divinely positioned. And no darkness, no betrayal, no delay, no rejection can stop what God has already ordained. Because when God places his hand on a woman, no force in hell can remove it.